Winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
Winter is coming.
The Northern Hemisphere is about to get a lot colder, so today we'll go over 7 tips and things you can do to prepare your garden for the winter. Starting off with these little baubles. Garlic is almost a must in every kitchen, and fortunately they are very easy to grow. Now you can start planting them as early as late September. Most people will start planting them in October, but you're definitely not too late by November. Make sure that your garlic is organic, otherwise it might be possible that they have been sprayed with growth inhibitor so that they won't sprout too early in the supermarket, but that will also mean that they won't sprout in your garden. Planting your garlic is very easy. You just want to separate the bulb into individual cloves and you want to plant them with the pointy side facing upwards. Space them about 10 centimeters or 4 inches from each other so that they have plenty of room to grow. Garlic doesn't like to have wet feet, or in other words, to have its roots waterlogged, so make sure that the soil that you plant them in is well draining. Plant your garlic about as deep as they are tall. You can have the pointy end stick out of the soil a little bit, that is not a problem. Now, I did say that planting garlic is very easy, which it is. However, it does take a long time for them to mature into a full bulb, easily up to 9 or 10 months. So make sure that you have a dedicated spot for your garlic to grow. All right, this bed is done. Now the next thing you can do is to clean your garden and your pathways. Sometimes there are just things laying around, in my case these pieces of wood or some pots that I just put to the side so I didn't have to deal with them in the moment. This also goes for weeds and other unwanted plants that grow in your pathways, especially if they're about to go to seed, so you don't have to deal with them the next season. With the possibility of frost in the air, now is the time to harvest anything that can take temperatures below 0. You might have some late beans hanging around or a lettuce growing somewhere. In my case, I had a late harvest of potatoes that I planted in August. Now, it wasn't the biggest harvest, but I can still make a meal or two with them. Some crops actually get improved flavor if they are hit with some cold weather, and this is because the starches in them are getting converted to sugars. And some examples of these are, of course, carrots, parsnips, kale, and even butternut squash, which is the reason why I won't be harvesting mine just yet. Some plants have been with you throughout the entire season and they have given you a fantastic harvest, but there comes a time that you have to say goodbye to them. Now, you can pull them out of the ground, but I like to cut them off right above soil level. This will leave the roots in the ground, which will decompose over time, giving your soil life a little bit of extra nutrients. However, the empty space that the roots will leave behind will also aerate the soil and it will improve the drainage of the soil, both of which are very important for the next generation of crops that you're going to sow. This tip falls a little bit into the category of cleaning your garden, however, it's what you do with the remaining material that sets it apart. And that leads into the next 2 tips. The end of the season is often a great time to start filling up your compost bin because there is plenty of organic material available. Your own plants can go straight from their grow beds into the compost bin. There are plenty of leaves literally up for grabs. And if you're active in a community garden, then perhaps some of your fellow gardeners might throw away their plant material, which you can then use. So start filling up your compost bin to invest in the dividends of next year. Alternatively, you can cut up the dead plant material and scatter it over your soil or your grow beds as a mulch, much like the so-called chop and drop method. Mulching your soil at the end of the season is very important for a few reasons. First, it creates a barrier against heavy rains that might wash away your soil, especially if there are no plant roots holding the soil together. Secondly, if there are still any plants growing in your soil, then the mulch will act as a nice blanket against the harsh, cold winter temperatures. And lastly, the mulch will eventually decompose over time, enriching the soil that has been depleted over the last growing season. You can use a lot of different materials as mulch. Like we said, the dead plant material, you can use compost or even leaves. However, do keep in mind that the leaves might be susceptible to harsh winds, so you might want to mix them up with the soil a little bit. If you have a greenhouse, then over time the outside will collect dust and dirt, and this will affect the amount of light that can penetrate your greenhouse. And over time this might actually be quite a lot, so you might want to wash your greenhouse by the end of the season. It might not look like much, but if I wipe my finger across my greenhouse, not really sure if you can see it, but that's pretty dirty. Now, you could of course save this job for the beginning of the next season, especially if you're not growing anything in the winter right now. But if you are, then you want to make sure those crops get every bit of light that they deserve. So get out your sponge and your mop and start cleaning your greenhouse. I'm going to give you a bonus tip that does not really prepare your garden for the winter, but it often gets forgotten around this time, and that is to clean your garden tools. You might be like, well, that was my growing season of the year, and you grab all your gear, put it in the shed, only to find it rusty and jamming by next spring. And that is just not a nice way to start your new growing season. So clean your garden tools and don't forget to rub them with a little bit of oil that protects them against rust, especially the ones that hinge, such as these garden scissors. Those were my tips to prepare your garden for the winter. If any of them were helpful, then help me out by hitting that like button. But did I miss anything important? Help everybody out by leaving it in the comments below. See you next time. Bye bye.